Hello everyone, this is Albert. I'm going to pick up now with a remainder of my discussion of KENT HOVInd in the King James Version. Then he says, meanwhile down in Egypt, what he actually means is in Egypt 13 centuries earlier, because he's back to the 2nd or 3rd century, he talks about the Alexandrian cult. This is something you hear a lot of in King James onlyism. It's completely ridiculous, by the way. They were one of the patriarchates of the church. It was the same church as the Antiochians and everybody and the people in Jerusalem were in, and it's the same church. He says they made their own version of the Bible. No. See, what you get into is, he's a very confused person. People already know this, I'm sure, but he's confusing a textual type with a text. What it is that if you take these early manuscripts of the Bible, most of it is absolutely identical, but there are key verses here and there, sporadic, and I'm ignoring at this point the stuff that's ridiculous. You don't even have to worry about stuff like misspellings, or I'm eliminating. But in terms of real textual differences, they're here and there between texts, and what you find is that certain texts, certain differences converge around certain places, and it makes sense because they would be copying from the same Bibles. So if there's a change there, then the change would get propagated. And what you find is certain things would congregate around Alexandria, and certain things would congregate around Byzantium, Constantinople. And what they do is they look at a manuscript and see how often it agrees with the Byzantine reading versus the Alexandrian reading, and they say this is an Alexandrian manuscript or a Byzantine manuscript according to that. It has nothing to do with that they're all identical. No. It's ridiculous. So he has no idea what he's talking about there. And talking about they left things out, no, they were different. They were working from, these are where the variations are. And it turns out, if you go further back in time, the Byzantine text and the Alexandrian text start to converge to a point and it basically ends up being what they would call a neutral text from where it begins, and that's what the aim is, to get to that text, and that's what textual criticism is about. Okay. He then talks about Sinaiticus and Vaticanus as if these were representative of an Alexandrian Bible. No. Again, they were Alexandrian text types, but there's Byzantine readings in those texts. It's just, do they lean Alexandrian or do they lean Byzantine? And by the way, you do not get Byzantine readings until like the 4th century, so it's one of the later text types that develops. It is not an original text type. Then he says the Latin Vulgate was made from Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. This is about 4 minutes and 50 seconds, 4 minutes 49 seconds into the video. He says that the Vulgate was, no, they weren't. First of all, Sinaiticus was in a monastery in the Sinai until like the 18th century or 19th century, so it's kind of hard for the Vatican to have actually gotten there and take a look at it. I mean, it's not something that Jerome would have, necessarily had on hand and it's ridiculous. The Latin Vulgate is obviously made from what's called a Western textual type. There's Western readings all over it, and it's all kinds of readings in the Vulgate. So, no, again, he's wrong. Then about a minute later or so, he talks about that the reason that these early manuscripts are all Alexandrian is because nobody used them, so they wore them out. They didn't wear out. If this is what all the manuscripts in Alexandria in that area were looking like, the Alexandrians were using them. I mean, hello? This is so absurd. I mean, this guy is just, why does and people are actually still posting his videos. I mean, this is, okay. He then goes into this list about 6 minutes, 20 seconds in the video of all the Bibles that are allegedly, he talks about Westcott and Hort translating these Alexandrian manuscripts, and gives this list of all these Bibles that are based on Westcott and Hort. Westcott and Hort did their work over a century ago, and there were some Bibles from the early 20th century that were based on their work, but modern Bibles, the ones that you would go and buy now, like the English Standard Version or the NIV or the NASB or others, they're not based on Westcott and Hort. They haven't been based on Westcott and Hort for well over half a century or more. In fact, probably close to a century. I mean, they're all based on USB or Nestle Allen, and this is like one of the things people can do. They're based on Westcott. No, they're not. Get it through your thick heads. They're not. Kent Hovind is an idiot. That's the problem here. He's just an idiot. He's ignorant. He talks about things of which he has absolutely no understanding, and he speaks in this nice breezy fashion and very folksy, but he doesn't know anything. He then he goes into this whole thing of citing manuscripts. Like we found 24,000 manuscripts here and 30. I have no idea where he's getting these numbers. I really don't. There are a lot of manuscripts out there of the New Testament, but the numbers he's coming up with, and what the New Testament would have to do with things found in the Dead Sea Scroll, I have absolutely no clue why that would. And he talks about the numbers in the Dead Sea Scroll. What he's talking about are fragments, not manuscripts. He's just throwing numbers around. He has no idea what these numbers are. Then he says the Isaiah scroll matches exactly the Textus Receptus. Well, considering the Textus Receptus is the family of New Testament manuscripts, beginning with Erasmus, and the book of Isaiah is in the Old Testament, it would make it a little hard to conform to anything in the Textus Receptus. I mean, being that the Textus Receptus deals with the New Testament and Isaiah's in the Old Testament. You kind of get it? And finally, he ends up with a recommendation to go buy or read a New Age Bible versions by Gail Ripplinger, which is probably the second worst book written for Christian apologetics in any field. There's one other that's actually worse. It's National Sunday Law, which has to do, but it's definitely second. It really is more errors per page than anything you could possibly see, and a whole lot of crazy. And if you want to know, and remember, this Gail Ripplinger, we're dealing with a person who decides the King James Version through some sort of acrostic algebra she's come up with, and how somehow the King James Version superiority was proven by the sinking of the Titanic. I mean, this is what we're dealing with here. In the Kent Hovind, Gail Ripplinger end of King James onlyism. I've waited so long to get a chance to respond to a Kent Hovind video, so I want to thank JLS 201 for this opportunity. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for your time.